Let me begin with a personal story of an encounter that I had many years ago. In 1989, I was about to get married, and I was searching for a good place to rent, a good house to rent. I met my landlord-to-be, who happened to be an elderly lawyer, who obviously did more real estate than legal practice. I mean, he was mainly just in business of real estate. So when I met him, he let me know that there were 3 categories of people that he would not rent his property to. Of course, he didn't know who I was. And the 3 categories of people that he would not rent his properties to were Igbos, Ijebus, and lawyers. Igbos, Ijebus, and lawyers. He made it very clear to me. I was disqualified on 2 accounts. He then said to me, pointing behind him at a few shriveled-looking books in a small bookshelf behind him, that he had the arsenal to destroy any tenant in court if I gave him any trouble. He later on, of course, discovered to his embarrassment that I was a law teacher and at the time advisor to the then Attorney General of the Federation. And of course, that I'm also Ijebu. I've shared this story to illustrate a point that I think is hugely important, which is that prejudice and bias are natural aspects of human nature. Everyone has prejudices and preferences that are reinforced by stories and narratives that they hear. Prejudice is a function of environment in which one is socialized and the level of exposure that one has. All across this country, different ethnicities are subjects of popular stereotypes, whether it is the notion that Ijebus are stingy, or that Igbos have an excessive love for money, or that the Fulanis are cunning, unforgiving, or more recently, violent, or that the Ebira and the Ika are practitioners of seasoned witchcraft. These are stereotypes, and they are, of course, by the very nature of stereotypes, wild generalizations, most likely to be false, and unlikely to hold up to any kind of empirical tests. But they are the narratives people have woven about other tribes and, in fact, people of other religions. Sometimes these stories are repeated so many times that they are soon accepted as facts. And when we accept these stories as facts about other people, and people of other ethnicities and people of other religions, who we have never met with or interacted with, they shape our judgments about them even before they have spoken. Elections, for example, by their very nature, tend to be already divisive. Partisan democratic competition compels us to align ourselves with the camps that most reflect our ideals and aspirations. In a diverse society such as ours, democratic competition is intensified by the socio-cultural cleavages that exist in society. This is true of any heterogeneous society or democracy. In an election cycle in which the major contenders come from different ethno-regional classes or zones, there was always a sense that the competition was going to be particularly intense. But at the same time, it would not be accurate to reduce the election to an ethnic census. As we saw, the contenders performed strongly in parts of the country other than their natal regions. Unfortunately, one of the unsavory tendencies that was witnessed in this election cycle, and has been so in previous ones, but perhaps heightened somewhat, was the weaponization of ethnic, religious, and sectional prejudices in ways that are damaging to social cohesion. Religion was quite clearly made an issue. And in some parts of the country, political biases are introduced even between denominations of the same religion. In some cases, ethnic profiling took place at polling booths. There's a popular female food blogger and YouTuber a YouTuber called Sisi Yemi, a Yoruba woman, who took to her verified Twitter handle to say, and I quote, "My husband and I were not allowed to vote. They said we look like Igbo people. I can't believe this," end of quote. Almost without fail, in every election cycle, politicians have forcefully, either overtly or covertly, sought to persuade voters that voting for their particular candidate or the particular political party they favor is the will of God, and that voting for the opposing party was a violation of the divine will. Repeatedly, we hear of prophets who support political parties, one way or the other. This is a matter of great concern because long after an election is over, and long after the leading contenders have sheathed their swords, the rhetoric, the words, and the means used to compete can have adverse long-term effects on society. Where the forces of primordial division and polarization are harnessed for the sake of electoral gain, the venom of such devices remain and continue to poison communal relations, setting neighbors against neighbors. Some of the political rhetoric that we have heard in the course of this election cycle have been disturbing because they recall similar rhetoric used by politicians during some of the darkest chapters of our country's existence. In the First Republic, the exploitation of prejudice and incitement of hatred against ethnic communities led to the collapse of that democratic dispensation. It led to bloody pogroms and a civil war that cost in excess of 2 million lives. We talk about the Civil War, but we seem to ignore the fact that it was the manipulation of ethno-religious sentiment that eventually boiled over into that tragedy. The demons released by that bloody conflict amongst brothers are yet to be fully caged, and we pay the price of that healing process every day. That is not a chapter of our history that we should ever allow to repeat itself. But believe it or not, Nigeria is changing. There are no longer any ethnically homogeneous enclaves in Nigeria. As our own nations have evolved, one of the most discernible changes that we have witnessed is the disappearance of ethnically homogeneous spaces. Everywhere across the country, people from diverse ethnic and religious backgrounds are schooling together, doing business together, commingling, intermarrying, and raising families. Our much talked about linguistic diversity is not a barrier, as many Nigerians are multilingual. Increasingly, we see that the heart and face of a new Nigeria is a socio-cultural hybrid, appreciative of the cultural diversity of our society, attuned to its culture, but also blessed with an inclusive cosmopolitan outlook. For many of these Nigerians, young Nigerians in particular, their ethnic and national identities are not in contradiction. For young Nigerians who belong to the most globalized generation in our country's history, this is especially true. Their friendships, their education, their lived experiences have brought them into contact with a febrile variety of identities and cultures in their societies and on the planet. And we see their multicultural outlook in the social networks, in the entrepreneurial partnerships, and their political activism, which transcend the old primordial allegiances. Leadership does not today, and Nigerian leadership today, does not have the luxury of toying with prejudice. The leadership elite, and when I refer to the leadership elite, I refer not just to the political elite, I refer also to the religious elite and to the business elite. We have a duty to conduct ourselves with a high sense of responsibility, even as we prosecute the contest for power. Historically conscious and patriotic elite all over the world recognize that beyond the letter of the law, beyond what the law asserts, there are lines that must not be crossed in the pursuit of political power, especially in fragile societies and democracies such as ours. One of such lines is the willful exploitation of sectional sentiments and the invocation of ethnic antipathies to mobilize a political constituency. This is the challenge of leadership in our own country today. And it's a challenge that our leadership elite face. Elites have a responsibility to discipline themselves first and foremost in the pursuit of political ambitions and the exercise of power to ensure that the fabric of our communities is not rent asunder. We must recognize that if peaceful coexistence is sacrificed on the altar of partisan politics, then all will be lost. I believe that Nigeria is neither unique nor exceptional on account of her diversity. The genre of scholarship and public polemic that makes a problem of our country's profusion of ethnicities and religions and characterizes it as a profound flaw is one that I differ strongly with. I very strongly differ that merely because we are ethnic nations that came together or that we are from different religions, for that reason it is necessarily a huge problem that is insurmountable. Our diversity is neither a liability nor a curse. It is in fact a blessing and an asset. Diversity deepens the pool of socio-cultural capital available to us. We're enriched by the frothy ferment of the vast multiplicity of perspectives which provide us with a treasury of tools for growth and progress. And I have long maintained that in Nigeria, what is at issue is not and has never been our diversity, but our capacity to manage it with a sense of fairness, equity, and justice. All diverse nations find their unique ways of managing the tensions which inevitably arise from the commingling of an assortment of people. Let me conclude with another personal story. On the 16th of July 2022, I went in for a surgery on my right femur at a hospital in Lagos. As I lay on the operating bed and I was about to be anesthetized, full anesthesia, which will put me out completely, I'll be completely unconscious for the 3 hours or so that the operation would take. Just before I lost consciousness, a thought crossed my mind that I would be absolutely at the mercy of these surgeons and paramedics and anesthesians who surrounded the bed that I was lying on. It struck me that I had actually allowed these people to take over my life, and I had to entrust them with my life. One of them was from the southeast, the head of the team was from Delta, some were Muslims, some were Christians, some were from the north, some were from the south. In fact, I suspect that one of them, who I spoke to later, did not even believe in God. Yet, as I lay on that bed, it didn't seem to matter where they came from, because they were experts. When we make the decisions that affect our lives and the decisions that affect our children the most, somehow we're able to ignore tribal or religious prejudices. The pilots who flew our planes, or who fly our planes, in fact, the pilots about a couple of weeks ago, I was flown to Lagos by 2 female pilots. So for those amongst my team who discriminate against women, they were left entirely in the hands of these 2 ladies who flew us all the way to Lagos. The teachers who teach our children in school, we don't necessarily ask where they're from so long as they are good teachers. The soldiers and other law enforcement agents who put their lives on the line for our safety every day, we don't ask them where they're from so long as they can do a good job. Even the members of our national football team, we don't care if all of them are called osinbajo so long as they can score. We don't care where they're from, and we don't ask those questions. This is the attitude that we must adopt always to build the nation of our dreams. Mobilizing the people of a country as complex and as heterogeneous as ours under the banner of a common purpose was never going to be an easy task. But that's not to say that it's impossible. Let us never forget that although we may speak different languages and belong to different tribes and profess diverse creeds, we are bound by a shared language and a shared hope, by a common humanity as Nigerians, and a supreme faith in all of the possibilities that lie in our country. Thank you very much for listening.